When I first saw the previews for this movie, I was not that excited for it. It had nothing to do with the story or the original comic, and I guess it was largely biased. See, before I knew anything about this movie, I didn't like it because I thought Robert Zemeckis had something to do with it. Robert Zemeckis. With each new release, I like him less and less. Pretty much any theatrical films released before Tintin that used motion capture to animate every character was written, directed, or at least produced by Robert Zemeckis. A lot of people have since realized that this method of animation doesn't really work when you use it for a whole movie. Look at Beowulf, a perfect example of a film that shouldn't exist. It's animation made to look like live action. Perfect for people who enjoy live action films with flimsy plots, but don't like for the main characters in the movies to look like they have souls. I'm also not a huge fan of stereoscopic 3D. I think it's one of the worst things to happen to animated films, which is not to say that live action films fare any better or that the method is any less gimmicky, but well, for the sake of argument, let's look at the number of films released in 2011. Keeping in mind that this is not necessarily a definitive number, I counted 410 films released this year. Of those, about 13 were animated, if we don't include films like The Smurfs or Chipwrecked, and I don't. When 3D first got big, animated films suffered a lot because it really seemed to promote a lot of laziness, and there's no better example of someone who takes advantage of the 3D gimmick than Robert Zemeckis, who pads his films like a 14-year-old pads their training bra. Alright, back to Tintin, because I am trying to tie this into the film review. When I found out that Zemeckis had nothing to do with this movie, I actually started to look forward to it, because even though motion capture hasn't worked in the past, as a whole, it can occasionally look impressive. So, let's find out if this motion capture film manages to bring the animation style some credit, or if it comes across as soulless as previous ventures.
I will find that ship, with or without.
Boy reporter Tintin comes across a model ship that he buys off of a merchant at the marketplace. Immediately after its purchase, two other gentlemen try to buy it off of him, but Tintin refuses and takes it home, curious as to why the item attracts so much attention. He goes to the library to find out and comes across some information on the ship the model was made after, the Unicorn. Apparently the ship, captained by Sir Francis Haddock, was carrying a secret cargo when it sank to the bottom of the ocean, and that only a true Haddock can find out what it was. After his apartment is ransacked twice by people trying to find the model ship, Tintin is captured by Sakharin, who is after the secret of the Unicorn too. He captures Tintin because he's after a piece of scroll hidden in the Unicorn model, one piece of 3 left by Sir Francis. Tintin is taken aboard a cargo ship captained by Sir Francis' descendant, the drunken Captain Haddock, who is being held captive by Sakharin and his men. Tintin and Haddock escape and seek to find the remaining scroll, which will hopefully lead to the secret before Sakharin can get his hands on it. There is a certain character to this film that I immediately found attractive. It feels from the first moments like an adventure movie or a mystery by the way it's set up. Despite this, I did find the first 20 minutes a bit frantic, and I found myself questioning some of the logic as some things seemed a bit convenient. But after a few rushed plot points, the film started to hit its stride and it was pretty easy to get absorbed into. Our main characters are Tintin and Haddock. Tintin is the plucky, adventurous hero, and Haddock's character, a failure of a captain who lives by the bottle and is, through much of the film, delightfully hopeless and slightly ridiculous, comes across as very enjoyable. Tintin as a character is well written and acted, but his appearance is a bit creepy at times, as he is the only realistic looking character in this movie. Still, I think the animation is handled better in this film than it ever has been, and unlike previous films using motion capture, it's taken advantage of in a way that merits its use rather than raising questions as to why something like CG or live action wouldn't have been better. Part of this is because of the tone. Tintin does not feel like a movie aimed primarily at kids, nor does it feel like it's aimed primarily at adults. Because of this, an animation style that sits in between CG and live action is appropriate, although I hesitate to imply that animation at any time should be directed only at kids. There is a lot of great adventure and suspense in this movie. It almost holds up with some of the great live-action adventure films in terms of story, while able to surpass them in some action sequences which do not have the limitations created by live actors. Unfortunately, because it was made to be shown in 3D, it is not completely devoid of scenes that clearly take advantage of this. I purposely saw this film without 3D so that I could look at it as subjectively, and while some scenes, like the chase scene close to the end of the film when Haddock and Tintin are trying to get the scrolls back, are enjoyably suspenseful and impressively animated in any dimension, other scenes come across as dragging on for far too long. The plane scene especially got under my skin, not only because of the 3D, but also because it's one of the few scenes in this film that seem to revert to cartoony humor, which when set up against the rest of the movie seems out of place. Still, those scenes aside, if this film were live action, I would say that it is filmed very well. I was very impressed with some of the angles and perspective used, and some of the scenes were set up well enough so that I almost wish I had gone to see it in 3D, just so I could really get the sense of depth that the creators were trying to achieve. Well, almost. I think the scenes that are obviously 3D relevant and those few scenes that do seem a bit childish do keep the film from reaching perfection, but I still found myself very much enjoying the adventures of Tintin, and for the first time hoping that a company will do more motion capture films like it. But seriously, guys, cut out the 3D gimmicks. They can only serve to make an otherwise well-executed film seem less credible. Next up, schedule permitting, Beauty and the Beast in 3D. Now, son of a bitch.